Rampage Poker loves to bluff off his stack, but every once in a while, he's lucky, and he makes 4 of a kind. Let's see if he can get paid, or if he screws this hand up too.
The session's winding down, but we're moving towards one of the largest hands of the night. You're going to want to strap in here because I pick up pocket threes in the cutoff. Little baby pairs, gotta love that. I raise up to 500, and I get the button to immediately 3-bet me to 1700. Small blind makes the call of the 1700, and I'm priced in to set mine because everyone's playing pretty deep stacked, and if I hit a set here, it's going to be pretty disguised. I make the call, and we see a flop of...
Rampage raises it up from the cutoff to 500 euros. They're in Barcelona. He has the pocket threes. The player on the button makes it 1700, and then the player in the small blind cold calls, which is when someone raises and someone re-raises, and then someone yet to act who has no money voluntarily put in the pot opts to call. It's important to recognize that cold callers' ranges will vary substantially based on their skill level. Some players will cold call with a lot of hands that should either 4-bet or fold, usually fold, like ace-jack offsuit, or pocket twos, or 9-7 suited. Other players are far tighter with their cold calling ranges with hands like ace-king, ace-queen suited, king-queen suited, or pocket jacks. Whatever the range is, it's usually pretty narrow and pretty specific, and that will very often result in flops that are good for their very specific range, either heavily favoring them if it's good for them, or just really not favoring them if it's not good for them. So if you can range the cold caller right, that will give you a huge edge. Rampage correctly calls in the situation, recognizing if he gets a set, he's going to be in a good spot. A lot of players think, oh man, pocket threes, $1,200 more, I'm probably behind. And if I don't get a set, I'm going to have to fold. And all of that is true, but implied odds exist. At this point, Rampage has to put in 1,200 more to try to win 40,000 from either of his opponents. He's getting amazing pot odds, something like, 35 to 1. That is excellent. When you have a small or medium pair, if you're getting something like 10 to 1 or better, it's usually okay to call and see what the flop brings. Rampage does it. Let's see if he makes a set.
And we see a flop of 9-5-3. Let's freaking go. We're in Bink City here. Action checks it over to the button player. Of course, I'm going to check my bottom set to my opponent. He makes it 2,500. Small blind gets out of the way and folds. And now with bottom sets, I think I just have to check raise for a lot of different reasons. Because one, I have a very strong hand when we're playing very deep stacked. I don't want to see a bad turn card where I can't get much value. And if he has a flush draw, then I would like to charge for that flush draw. And if he has an overpair, then I'd like to stack that overpair. So I make it 7,000 right off the bat. Starting off with a check raise here, trying to get some value. And my opponent tank calls with about 30,000 behind. So here when he calls, it seems like he must have a very good hand. And I hope he has like aces or something like that.
The flop comes 9, 5, 3, 2 clubs. Bingo, bango, bongo for Rampage. He might actually win a pot. Small blind checks. Rampage checks. You may say, why not bet? You have a set, and the board's draw heavy. Well, this is a spot where you can kind of count on the player on the button to continuation bet, perhaps far more than even the GTO strategy recommends, because a lot of players just like to bet when they were the pre-flop aggressor. That is exactly what happens this time. They bet 2,500 into the 5,400 pot, and then Rampage has to figure out how much to make it. He goes for 7,000, and I think this is fine and good, because if your opponent has any pocket pair, they're just not going to fold for the most part against Rampage Poker. Even people in Barcelona know that Rampage is too crazy. So you're going to get called by those hands. If you go 7,000, your opponent might even stick around with various overcards with a club, like ace of clubs king, ace of clubs queen. So I think this is a pretty great size. The opponent then calls. Let's go to the turn.
So we're going to a turn with one of the bigger pots of the night brewing now. Turn is the Jack of Hearts. It's okay. I certainly could be losing to pocket jacks here now at this point, but I can't be afraid of monsters under the bed. I've definitely got to go for value, and I think I have one of two options, which is somewhat tricky here. I certainly could go half pot, maybe. I want to size for an all-in on the river, and I don't want to get too greedy on this turn card here, right? So if he has 30k behind, I can bet 10k on the turn, and then 20k on the river. Or I could also just shove all-in right here, right now, and I get all the hands that are already going to call to commit their stack. Aces, kings, queens. I can't imagine those hands are ever going to be folding to an all-in bet. I take my time and think about those two options, and I decided to just go for what I said in the first place. Just bet 10,000, half pot. It seems like a very easy decision to commit his stack on the river here and not get too greedy. I don't want to risk losing value if my opponent has a flush draw or something, because he's never going to fold a flush draw to a half pot bet. So for that reason, I make it 10,000.
The turn is the Jack of Hearts, putting up all sorts of additional draws. Rampage goes for 10,000, half pot, setting up roughly a half pot river shove. And normally, you do want to use somewhat geometric bet sizing, where you bet roughly the same percentage of pot on the turn and river when you have a strong polarized range like Rampage does. However, in this situation, I think Rampage wants to bet bigger, maybe like 15,000. Because if you consider the opponent's range, it's going to be either a pair, like aces, kings, queens, jacks, which you lose to, tens. Those hands aren't going to fold. Maybe a 9 if you happen to have like king 9 suited, but that's not going to fold. Or a draw. And those draws can either be high equity draws or low equity draws, but the flush draws are also going to call any reasonable amount. And if they fold for 15,000, that's fine, right? So, because the opponent's range, I think, to get to this point should be quite good, I think Rampage needs to go a little bit bigger, because those good hands aren't going to fold to the turn bet. And then on the river, no matter what it is, they're going to be getting even better odds to call. And so I think a lot of the hands that call the flop check raise and get to this jack turn are kind of pot committed, if they have any equity at all, besides perhaps like hands like pocket sevens. So just get more money in the pot immediately before the board gets scary. And you have to realize on this type of board, it will get scary some portion of the time. Anytime a club comes, maybe if the board pairs, maybe if another straight card comes. So I think Rampage should probably have gone a little bit bigger.
And my opponent takes his time and ends up making the call, which is lovely, because that means the pot is bloating up.
The opponent opts to call. And when the opponent now calls this half pot turn bet, I think you can start to remove a lot of the hands from their range, like pocket 8s and worse. But if they have a 9 against Rampage, the Maniac, they're not going to fold. So I think the opponent's going to have a lot of pairs and also a lot of draws. Let's keep that in mind heading to the river.
Almost $40,000 into the middle, and let's see what happens. River is the 3 of clubs. What? Overkill. Guys, I have quads. I have quads with 40,000 in the middle, and I'm going to announce all in for his last 20,000. I take my time. I Hollywood it over. Of course, I can't just immediately snap all in because that looks really tricky. I finally announce all in after pretending to think.
The river is the 3 of clubs. Rampage has 4 of a kind. He's going to win. And he opts to go all in, which I think is perfectly fine and reasonable and good. However, I think a lot of people in this spot make a blunder. They instead opt to check, thinking, oh, I made a really good hand. I want my opponent to bet. But that's a really bad play, because if your opponent does have aces, kings, queens, tens, king 9, they're never going to bluff this river and or value bet this river too thinly. So this is a spot where Rampage needs to bet. Other players also make the blunder of betting small, like $3,000 into the $39,000 pot, thinking, oh, I really want to get called. And yeah, you do really want to get called. But if your opponent has an overpair or a top pair or a flush, they're going to call any amount. So you might as well bet all in. And in this scenario, all in isn't even that much. It's only half pot. Rampage puts it in. I like it. Let's see what the opponent does.
And my opponent goes into the tank. And when he doesn't snap call, I don't love it because he obviously doesn't have a flush. And he's thinking about contemplating on a fold with an overpair, which would be a disastrous situation. Anyways, he takes his time and ends up announcing a couple things out loud. He says he can fold sometimes, which is not really what you want to hear when you want to get called. And he says he'll call 25% of the time. Seems like he does some sort of randomization of the 25% and ends up folding and letting me know he folded aces with the ace of clubs, which is such a sick fold by him, and a very, very good one at that. So got to give my opponent props.
After a bunch of deliberation, the opponent claims, maybe they did, maybe they don't, I don't know who it is. They claim they fold pocket aces with the ace of clubs, which is actually a pretty good bluff catcher because it beats maybe some thin value bets if Rampage happen to be tricky with pocket queens or a weird pocket tens or a weird ace jack. And it also blocks the flush, which are very obvious value hands that Rampage could have. I think this is kind of unlucky for Rampage if the opponent did actually fold a hand like pocket aces. Of course, don't believe what your opponents tell them. If they show you, that's very different than telling. So did the opponent fold aces here? Look, maybe, probably, I don't know. But I think if they did, it means they have not seen Rampage play poker because Rampage is not afraid to get in there and blast it. That said, This is a spot where I think a lot of people drastically under bluff. Consider what we need Rampage to be bluffing with in this spot in order to hero call. We need him to be bluffing with stuff like 8-7, 7-6, 8-6, 6-4. Does he even have those in this pre-flop range? I mean, he might have some of the suited ones, but some of the suited ones just made a flush. Plus, he may not blast him on the turn. He could have a hand like Queen 10, maybe King 10 with spades or clubs. So notice half of those are clubs. He could be going nuts with pocket fours or ace 4. But again, some of those are going to be clubs. So this is a spot where I think against most people in most games, you should start to make pretty big hero folds. But against Rampage, unless he's down to his case 40,000 in Barcelona and can't get any more money, should probably pay him off. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a quick favor before you go. Click the like button down below, click the notification bell, click the subscribe button. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you next time.